Hey, I'm Julie. Welcome back to my studio. We're continuing on with our summer tutorial painting series with a painting of a dahlia flower. This particular dahlia is called Apple Blossom, and I love how open and gorgeous it is. It has this beautiful yellow center and these really kind of sherbety, pastel-y colored petals. They're really gorgeous. And so this is the piece that we're going to be painting in the tutorial today. If you have not gotten a chance to check out my other summer tutorials in this series, you can click the link above to find the full playlist of all of the paintings that we've made so far this year. All right, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the materials that we're using today are a piece of mixed media paper. We're going to be using a round number 10 paintbrush. And then the paint colors we're using are white, cadmium yellow medium, Quinacridone Red, and Quinacridone Magenta. And I have all of these listed and linked up in the description below. And I have my image here of our dahlia on my iPad. I actually have, let's see, a couple different ones. I love this one because this version of the dahlia has these little white kind of center petals, whereas this one, the center petals are more pink. I think we're gonna do more the white version here, but for the shape and the colors in the bigger petals, we'll use this image because they're just really nicely laid out for us. And it's a little easier to see than when there's a whole bunch of them distracting us. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with making our first color to start putting in our petals. So we're gonna make the petals out of a light, a medium, and a dark color. I like to use my medium for the base layer, and then we kind of work up into the highlights and then work down into the shadows from that color. So we're gonna make kind of a medium peachy pink color. And you can see how Quinacridone Red makes a very kind of almost on the coral side of pink. And so I'm gonna use just a little mixture of the two of them to kind of make a more in-between color. Kind of a more balanced red pink color, I guess. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. These are on the lighter side, these petals, so I think this is a good kind of shade to start with. Okay, and then I'm gonna get some of the paint out of my brush just by twisting and pressing down. It's kind of like you're wringing the paint out of your brush. And I just get my bristles smoothed out again. Okay, so let's plan out just where the center is going to be so that we can kind of hold that shape for later. So I'm just gonna make a little dotted, oops, I probably did that a little big here. A little dotted line about there. And then we can build our petals out from that center point. It's always really helpful to have that middle point so we know where our petals are ending up. So I'm gonna start at the outside of the petals and press down and kind of draw down one side to kind of form the shape of the petals. And then I'm going to press down and kind of go out. And then I'm going up onto my tip as I pull towards the center to kind of get my line to taper off there, my brush stroke, and then we're just gonna fill them in. There we go. And these petals are overlapping, and there's also thinner ones that are kind of tucked in between, which I think is really lovely and sweet. So it doesn't really matter too much how we lay out these petals, as long as there's like a little dip in between them. We can make some bigger, we can make some smaller. See how there's like a narrower one right there? So I'm gonna go ahead and put in a more narrow, slightly pointier one. These have a lot of variety in them, and it's just really kind of fun and playful. So I just like to to go to town. That's one of the things that I think is very forgiving about flowers, is that you can create your own sort of version. You can wiggle your strokes a little bit. They're very organic, and not every petal is exactly the same. So we can just kind of have some leeway and some freedom to create different versions and not have every single one be an exact copy. All right, we'll do a little narrow one right here. It's a bit more on the pointed side. There we go. And whichever way is more comfortable for you to paint, you can start at the tip or you can start at the base. I think dragging towards the center feels the most comfortable for me, so I kind of start there. But then when I end up here, sometimes I'll just turn my brush around and go back out. So I kind of switch it up, I guess. So whatever way feels the best for your hand. Okay, and we're going to put in one more little wiggly thin one. Now, as I'm looking, it looks like these petals are a little bit larger and these ones are a little shorter. So I'm going to extend maybe this one just a little bit more and this one just a bit to help it look a bit more symmetrical. There we go. That looks good. Okay, the next color that we're going to make is a darker pink to kind of put some creases into our petals. So I think because this has almost like a sort of watermelon-y look to it, I'm just going to make straight into this same area here because my paint is still a little wet, so we can use some of that. I'm going to just use straight up red and see how that looks. I'm going to make it less white, more red, so we get a darker color. There we go. And then I'll just sort of twist my brush again to wring out that extra paint and get any of that lighter color that was still in my brush. Let's see, I'm gonna do just a little test to see how that contrast looks. I think that looks pretty good for now. Okay, so we're just gonna do some little creases and streaks on the petals. Now, each of these petals looks like it kind of has two creases that are coming up towards the tip. They're sort of creating this elongated, sort of pointed oval shape. And so we're gonna put those in on each petal, and then maybe just a little bit more of like a textural kind of brushy stroke that kind of models the petals a little bit. So let's see how that goes. We'll get up on the tip of the brush and we'll just put in the crease lines, and then maybe just a little really light sort of feathery stroke like that, where I'm just really softly, I'm almost dry brushing it, because see how you can see the bristles of my brush showing there? So let's try that on another one. Just gonna do our little oval, and then really softly, just some little textural dry brushy strokes. And if these don't turn out the way that you like, if they're looking strange to you or whatever, you can mix another shade of this medium, or is our medium pink, and go back over and kind of correct or erase some of the things. Flower petals are so forgiving. You can go back and forth, kind of getting the mixture and the percentage of each color that you like. And so if you make a little mistake, no worries. This one I'm gonna, because it's kind of squished, I'm gonna wiggle my lines just a little bit. And I don't know why I just skipped up to this one. I skipped a petal, so let's go back. I think dry brushing is very satisfying. You can just kind of really softly kind of create hazy textural sort of strokes, which I love. Okay, I think that looks great. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse out my brush now. We're gonna let the petals dry some and go ahead and put in our center, at least our first color in the center. That will help us kind of develop each area of the painting and keep them kind of together as we paint. Sometimes the values can get off, like getting the correct lights and darks to get a really nice balanced look to your painting if you really fully develop one whole section but leave out another one. So let's go ahead and do that. This center looks more sort of closed up to me, like the little stamens, or I don't even know, all those little fluffy things in the middle are kind of compacted. So I like the look of these ones better. So I'm going to just zero in on that for a minute and we'll go ahead and copy that one. Okay, so I'm just going to grab some straight up yellow and some red. We're going to make a dark orange color. We'll go ahead and do a darker color in the middle and then we'll accent it with little dots of yellow later on. This actually looks pretty good. I thought it might be too dark, but I think this is good and we'll go with it. So I'm just going to paint in my center, and for the edges, I don't want to paint a crisp, straight edge because that's not what we have here. We have a very textural outer edge. We will be putting in more light yellow to also help with that texture, but even with this first layer, I just want to sort of dot my outer edge and then paint up to it, so that we're not creating a line in our painting that's really hard to get rid of or to hide later on. And I do have some white here. I need to maybe extend my center just a teeny bit. And we'll fill in those little gaps of white too later with our darkest color probably. Make little shadows in between those petals. There we go. Okay, and then we can just go straight into our yellow. I'm gonna just sort of let it mix into whatever shade it wants to on my brush. And I'm just gonna start doing some little dots. And they're gonna soften as we paint through our yellow and start getting more and more touching the orange. And that's okay. We're just gonna kind of keep dotting. There we go, and I'll go get some more yellow. And we'll just concentrate some little strokes on the outer edge. We'll probably need to come and put a few more of these in at the very end because they're sort of the very topmost stroke. They're overlapping all the petals, but this is a good start. So I'll go ahead and leave it at that for now. So let's go back to, where's our other picture? There it is. All right, so I've rinsed out my brush, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a really pretty light pastel yellow for the petals. So let's go ahead and get some white. And some yellow. We don't want to do too much yellow. We can always add more. We want to make sure we don't go too far too quickly because yellow is a really strong color. Ooh, pretty. This makes me think of ice cream, and I'm not sure why. Maybe lemon ice cream. I'm holding it up just to see. I think maybe just a tiny bit more, and then we'll be good. So we're basically just going to be creating sort of striations, like striping patterns with this yellow, this pastel yellow. So we're going to also kind of try to achieve a little bit of that dry brushy feel, but I have a lot of paint in my brush right now, so I'm trying to get some of it out. There we go, so that the bristles have a chance to kind of separate and do a bit of a brushy look, but let's go ahead and give it a try. I'm gonna just go ahead and choose one and kind of go along the edges. Ooh, that's pretty. I don't want to totally cover up any of my other colors, like paint it out. So I'm just going to go over here and there. And along this edge, it kind of looked like this edge was popping out with some of that yellow highlighting it. I think that looks pretty good. I'm just doing like little lines. So let's go ahead and try this one. I see in the photo it's mostly yellow kind of in that center point. So we'll go ahead and do that. But then we want to let that medium pink show somewhere in the petal so that we don't entirely blot it out. So I'll just let it kind of show more on the sides. I'm just using really soft, light pressure, just feeling my way. Here, let's go ahead and do this one. Now I see this one, this petal has a lot more of the yellow towards the tip. Oops, I got some pink in there. And so I'm going to do more of it than I would on the other ones. Same thing for this guy. We'll give him a good little swirl. And I can also use this yellow to show which petal is sitting on top of which. So I already sort of started doing this one opposite of what's in the photo, which is fine. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tuck it all the way in. And you can see now it shows that this petal is the one that's sitting on top of its neighbor. So I'm gonna do that to kind of help separate out some of them. So in the photo, these two are on top and that one's in the bottom or underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and just emphasize those little lines, and that will help some come to the foreground, some kind of recede. This one I already kind of did, so it's like sitting on top of its neighbor there. There. Okay, now Now that I have this yellow in here, I think I'd like to make a peachier version of this yellow. So just grabbing a little bit of our red and mixing it so we get a little bit more of a pinkish peachy version. And I'm gonna just scatter that a little bit here and there to help with our pretty kind of pastel-y, sherbety colors. How many words can I use to describe these colors? There we go. So I'm gonna just do a few little lines of it for some variation. Really just kind of where I put the yellow, but I'll just go over a few of them just sort of arbitrarily. I'm just scattering it around. There we go. Okay, so now we're gonna go over to this photo and look again at those petals that are in the center. We're gonna make white petals and then maybe add just a little bit of yellow at the base of them. But let's go ahead and just start out with white. And they're very simple. They're like a single 1 or 2 little brush strokes. So I'm just gonna work some white into my brush to fill up the bristles. And I'm just gonna do like a stroke or 2 and then go back for more paint so that I'm not painting over and over and over and kind of blending into the wet colors that are below, if any of them are still wet and kind of can mix. So these little petals, they're centered on each of the big ones, and there's sort of like a little stack of them, but we'll kind of just do like one and see how it looks. So I'm just gonna start here because this one looks really easy. So I'm gonna just do press down and kind of pull up and let it go to a point. That looks nice. Maybe I'll do a second little one to kind of show that there's like a double layer there. There, we're just gonna keep them real simple. So we're gonna make our little shapes just like that. And if I want to do another one, hint at another 1 or 2 to kind of create some depth, we can do that. Here we go. All right. I think a few of these got a little thin because I was starting to run out of paint. So I'm going to get a bit more white and just give another stroke to the very tip of some of these to help it pop out. There. Okay, and then I'm just going to grab some yellow and bring it over here. Maybe we'll soften it with just a tad bit of white. Just take the very edge off of it. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so now I'm going to use the yellow and start at the base of each of the little white petals and just stroke a bit to kind of tint the base of the petal. Right now the petals look weird because they're sitting on top of the center a little bit, and we'll fix that in a moment, but that's okay. We can just put it here and it's all right if it overlaps. Just real softly. Some of these ended up looking a bit clunky. I think I pushed a little too hard, so my strokes got really big, kind of fat. So I'm gonna go back with some white and just soften these a bit. That looks good. Like I said, just back and forth, back and forth. And the more layers that you add, kind of going back and forth and honing in exactly the color or the value that you want, that adds so much character and interest to the surface of the painting and more color depth and everything. So that looks good. So I ended up with sort of a brighter yellow and a softer yellow just by adding in a bit more of that white. Okay, we are nearly done, but looking at this, I can tell it really just needs something dark to really give an oomph to these petals and to help them feel a little bit deeper. So what I'm seeing is that these bigger petals, they can have a pretty dark magenta on them when they're overlapping. So like in these areas here, it can be pretty dark. So I'm gonna go back over here to our original reference. I'll just have that for looking. And I'm just gonna pop in some pure magenta. And I'm gonna be real gentle and careful with it. With my, the tip of my brush, I'm making sure that I only have a little bit in there and I'm staying pretty pointy on the tip. And the place that I like to start with these sort of shadows is where one petal sits on top of another one or just deep down in some of these crevices. So maybe I'll start with the little crevices. So like where the center of the flower is touching the petals. I'm just doing some little lines. So here's a petal sitting. There's some little crevices. Here's where a petal is sitting on another. I kind of can emphasize that edge. That looks really pretty. And see, that immediately adds some more interest and depth to the painting. So I'm just gonna scatter in. And then this petal is underneath the one, I can't speak. It's underneath its neighbor. So I'm gonna go under like that. And already these are really popping out and looking beautiful. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out which one was on top of which here. I think that one was there. It's almost like I'm drawing little lines. It's like little thin kind of accent lines. And like I said before, if I do too much, like that looks on the verge of too much to me, I can come back with my peachy or my yellowy color and just kind of soften that edge, rein it in a bit, bring it back. It's kind of like our little push and pull. And it's so satisfying when you feel like your painting is missing something, like it feels a little flat or a little lifeless. Often you just need to bump up the values. You need that darker value. You need a lighter value. Often if you have a lighter value, like we have white, we have almost pure white in here, but you don't have a dark value to kind of balance it at the opposite end of the value spectrum, it will kind of fall flat and really won't feel as bright as it should because it doesn't have that opposite dark. So I feel very passionately about values and their power to kind of solve problems in your painting. Okay, that looks good to me. I think I don't want to go much further or else it'll turn into a dark pink dahlia, which I'm not going for. So I'm gonna just get that color out of my brush and I'm gonna fix up this one little place. My peach is dried, but my yellow is still there. So I'm gonna just use my yellow to kind of get that back a little bit there. And anywhere that ended up looking harsh or strange, I can just sort of fix with this yellow. Yeah, that looks good to me. Okay, so the last thing that we're gonna do is just bring a little bit more oomph to the center of the dahlia by bringing in our light yellow. So I'm gonna zip back over and look at the one that we were working from more. I'm gonna just get some straight from the tube yellow, and we're gonna emphasize the center a little bit more. We're gonna gather some more dots together. Help that look a little bit more solid. Just placing a few more dots there. There, that looks really good. And then I'm gonna leave the orange in a ring around that. And on the very outside edge, I'm gonna put some more of these yellow dots. And they're gonna overlap over our little white ones. Actually, these look more like lines rather than dots, so that's what I'm gonna do. They're gonna overlap over our little white petals and show that the center is sitting on top of everything else and kind of overlapping over. And I'm trying to do this delicately and not get rid of our orange or too much of the petals. So really kind of just getting a little balance there between all the things we want to make sure we're keeping. There, now, same thing. I feel like we need something a little bit darker, so I'm just going into our magenta, and I'm swirling it with my yellow, just a tiny bit here, and I want a shade of orange that's darker than the one we've got. And I'm gonna just go ahead and do a few dots of that. I feel like that makes such a big difference, even though it's a very small thing. The center now has a full value range, just like the petals do. We've got some really light colors and then the dark. There, and I don't want to overdo it, so I think I'm gonna leave it at that. Now, the yellow is the lightest value we have in the center, and now that we have a really nice dark value, I feel like, okay, the last thing I want to do is create a slightly lighter value yellow to help pop that center even more, to help it really have its full range. So we'll go ahead and just make that lighter yellow, and I'm just going to put it in the very center. There, I think that's great. I'm gonna put back in some of my darks that I got rid of. There. All right, I am really happy with this. This looks like all the values are well balanced, so I think we are finished. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this tutorial and hopefully painting along if you had your paints with you. If you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to check out my online painting classes. You can find them by clicking the first link down in the description. In each of my painting classes, we focus in on acrylics, and they are beginner-friendly and self-paced nature subject classes. So I have one on garden blooms, one on water lilies, and one that focuses in on beginning to paint birds. So if those sound good to you, I would love to have you join me in one of those classes. All right, I will see you next time, and until then, happy painting.